Hi, this is Haley Judd.
And I'm Jen Albee.
And welcome to Back to Our Roots. Once again, we're jumping ahead a little bit, and this week we're going to be diving into the 10th commandment. You shall not covet anything that is your neighbor's. Now, the 10th commandment is interesting because it's connected to the 7th in the same way that the 6th and the 9th were connected. If you recall, the 6th commandment, you shall not commit adultery, was about our actions, but the 9th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, was about what is in your heart that might lead you to act in the ways we talked about with the 6th commandment. In the same way, the 7th commandment, you shall not steal, is about your actions. And the 10th commandment, not coveting, is all about what is in your heart that might lead you to sin in those ways. As the Catechism says, the 10th commandment concerns the intentions of the heart. So once again, we're going to be really looking inside ourselves at what is going on in our hearts that might lead us towards sin. And the Catechism really outlines two main ways that we could struggle with the 10th commandment: greed and envy. So when we're talking about greed, we're talking about the desire to always have more. And when we're talking about envy, we're talking about the desire to have what others have. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass it to Jen to share a little bit about greed and envy and how we struggle with them.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to note, before I get into greed and envy, I think it's important to note that when we say covet, it's not merely, it's not just about wanting what your neighbor has. Coveting is to want to the point of seeking to take away and own something that belongs to another person. Okay? Now, these commandments that revolve around coveting, it's not necessarily a violation to look at something and want something. It's to want something to the point that you're going to take it from somebody else. You can want something and obtain it justly. So the Catechism does say, this is in 2537, it is not a violation of this commandment to desire to obtain things that belong to one's neighbor, provided this is done by just means. Okay? So what is forbidden by the 10th commandment are greed, which is the desire to amass earthly goods without limit. Now, we have been talking about this commandment, and I keep bringing up these seasons of greed that I have a tendency to have. I really like to buy things, and sometimes I will buy too many things. I will spend too much money just for the sake of getting things. And so I'm being greedy, and I need to rein it in, right? Greed is the disordered love of riches. We should love God above all things and our neighbor as ourselves. But we can begin to love money more. There's this quote that's like the love of money is the root of all evil. Greed is the root of evil, right? Now, with envy, when we're jealous or envious of someone else's abilities or talents or gifts, this is something that we constantly struggle with, right? Especially in this world of social media. We're looking at everyone's highlight reel, and we're seeing things, we're seeing the best parts of their lives, and we're thinking, wow, I want that. Why don't I have that? Why don't I look like that person? Why don't I have that person's talents, gifts, whatever it is? And when we do that, what we are essentially saying to God is that you made a mistake on me. You didn't make me like that person. Why not? And so a great way to combat envy is to dig a little deeper inside yourself and find out what your gifts and your talents are. And maybe you already know them, but dig deeper into it and find that those are gifts and talents given to you by your Creator, and you have something to offer the world that nobody else has. Okay? It's if we remember that God is the one who gave us our gifts and talents, if we remember that God made us exactly who we are, exactly how we're meant to be, and we accept that and we identify ourselves in Christ, then it's so much easier to look at someone else's talents and gifts and celebrate that instead of saying, well, why isn't that me? The presence, I have this quote, the presence of someone else's beauty. And you can replace beauty with gifts, talents, whatever, car, house. The presence of someone else's beauty is not the absence of your own. It's a really important thing to remember and to reflect on. And then I get a little quirky. This talking about the envy part reminded me of Dr. Seuss, and I know Dr. Seuss is a little bit controversial right now, but there's a great quote that says, "There is no one alive who is youer than you." And I think we can all identify with that, and especially if we have children, right? We look at our children, we're like, no, you are special, you are great, you're unique, you're exactly how God created you to be. So flip that and bring it back to you and tell yourself that. And the greatest way that we can combat, as I said, is that we can combat envy is to recognize God created you exactly how you are. He loves you exactly how you are. And then to pray a prayer of thanksgiving. Be thankful for how God created you and for all the gifts and talents that he gave you. And I don't want to hear that he didn't give you any gifts and talents, because he did. I'm pushing it back to Haley.
Thank you, Jen. That was wonderful. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of my thoughts and experiences with greed and envy. Starting with greed, in my small group on this past Monday when we were discussing the 7th commandment, we just had a really great conversation about how we can fight back against greed and the desire to have more, and balancing, enjoying good things with, being a charitable person. And what we just kept coming back to was the idea of generosity, right? That the more generous we are, the more we give, the more we're going to be protected from greed. And as we were pondering this, it really became clear to me that there's 2 types of generosity that we're called to in the battle against greed, and both of them are so important. And one of them is planned generosity. And this is where you look at your finances, you look at your budget, and you set aside some money. You make that sacrifice to give some money to the church, to charity, to whatever it is, to sponsor a child. And that's going to be factored into your financial plan. And that is something that we do know that we're called to. And that's great, but it's not quite enough to always help us in the battle of greed. And the other type of generosity we're called to, I'm calling spontaneous generosity. And this generosity consistently makes me think of my mother, who was perhaps one of the most spontaneously generous people I've ever met. And what my mom would do is she would run into someone, she battled cancer, and so she would be in a lot of cancer clinics, and she would run into a woman who was crying, and she'd have on an inspirational necklace that was encouraging her, and she would take it off and give it to that woman and be like, "You're going to be okay. Here's a cross. Let me pray with you." She gave out, every time someone gave her a prayer shawl, that prayer shawl ended up with someone else. She would take off the coat off her back and give it to someone. And so while it's good for us to have that planned generosity, I think we all need to be ready to give at a moment's notice. And that requires detachment, which is something we're going to talk a little bit more in our Going Deeper. We're going to talk a little more about in our Going Deeper video. But I think that if we're planning our giving, we're giving, from what we have in our finances, but we're also ready to just help someone in need at any moment's notice, we're going to be pretty protected against greed and the desire to accumulate without limit. So with that, I wanted to transition and talk about envy. So Jen did a great job talking about, appreciating our talents. But the Catechism had this other side of envy that I wanted to address, which is envy being sadness at another person's prosperity, right? Sometimes we think of it as just wanting other people's possessions. But what I see in myself and in other people a lot of times is envy of life accomplishments in others, sadness at other people's prosperity, specifically ones that maybe we don't have. So, I'm definitely in the stage of life where there's a lot going on. And so I think people are saying, oh, well, that person's engaged. I want to be engaged. And instead of being happy, we're jealous. Or that person just had a baby. I want to have a baby, and we're jealous. Or that person, their marriage looks so much better. Or they got that promotion, and I want a promotion. They make this much money. And so instead of being happy for even people we love's prosperity, we end up being kind of sad and twisted with envy. And this is something, I have to be honest, that I've really struggled with. I think for me it comes from, I grew up with one sister who was a year and a half older than me. So we were very close in age. It was just the two of us. And, not in any harsh way, but we were constantly compared, right? Mm-hmm. So every school, every activity we did, we were so close in age that we were constantly compared against one another. And a lot of times I can fall into the pattern of spending my days comparing myself to everyone around me. Mm. And that's a really miserable way to live. Because as Jen said, I'm not anyone else around me. I'm called to be me. And God has a plan for my life. Mm-hmm. And when I'm constantly worried about why my plan doesn't look like someone else's plan, I can miss it. And I'm doing a disservice to the people around me. There was a beautiful quote by St. John Chrysostom that said, "Would you like to see God glorified by you? Then rejoice in your brother's progress, and you will immediately give glory to God." And that quote really touched me, and I hope it'll inspire you as well. And if this is something that you can struggle with too, with comparison and envy at other people's accomplishments, I just encourage you to take it to prayer. That's what I've had to do. And sometimes daily, that you continually have to offer up letting go of what someone else has that you wish you did, or comparing yourself to others. But take it to prayer, and God will guide you through. I think greed and envy are something that we all can struggle with. We'll be praying for you as you watch this video and go into your small groups and maybe take some of these things to prayer. Thank you for joining us, and with that, Jen is going to introduce our family for this week.
Yes, we are talking to Katrina Misley and her two children, Cora and Isaac, and I hope you enjoy what they have to say.
Hi, my name is Katrina Misley, and this is my daughter Cora.
Hi.
Who is 11, and my son Isaac.
Hi.
Who is 8. And we have been parishioners at Christ the King since the parish merged and became Christ the King. And we've been living in Concord since the beginning of her life. And I work at Holy Family Academy in Manchester, teaching 7th and 8th grade. And we are going to talk about the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's possessions. So I think the main way we live this out as a family is practicing gratitude. I think when you're really grateful and you take the time to appreciate all of the things God has given us, because he's given us everything. There's nothing we have that we could have come up with on our own. That really helps you avoid jealousy and greed. And one thing we do as a family every night when we say our prayers is we list things that we're thankful for from that day, and just things we're thankful for in general. And you guys are usually thankful for the same things, but that's good. It's good. It's good that you're thankful for them. And Corey, you had some wise wisdom.
If you're ever feeling jealous, you could make yourself feel happy for the person that you're jealous of, that they have nice things and that they're able to have nice things, and feel good for them.
Yeah. So I think another way to live out this commandment is to be aware of the gifts and talents that God has given us, and to be thankful for that as well. I know that you guys probably don't struggle with this, but I struggle a lot with comparison. I'm trying to compare myself to other people. And I found one thing that helped. I haven't done this in a while. It's probably due for another one of these. I prayed, I found this online, the Litany of Humility, and I found it really helpful. And I don't remember all of it, but it had phrases like, God, grant me that other people will be noticed and I won't be. Other people will be praised and I won't be. Other people will be thanked when I'm not thanked. And that really helped me, well, not completely overcome, but it helped me with that feeling of comparison and wanting to get the notice and the praise that other people were getting. So I think that that's part of the commandment too, is recognizing our own gifts and being thankful for that without being envious of other people's gifts. And that is how we try to live out the 10th commandment. So thank you guys for joining us.